projects, which together are a group of services that we're developing. We have the PlanX services, which help people to apply for planning, to find out more about the planning process. And we have the BOB system, which is a back office planning system, and users for that system are planning officers and planning departments, and it's a back office system for processing planning applications. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. Okay, so this is today's agenda. So we'll be presenting to you for about 45 minutes, starting off with the BOBS slides. So there's going to be an update from me about the BOBS roadmap, and then we're going to have some of the Unbox team talk about the integrations workshop with existing systems. We're going to have a demo of the dashboard tabs from Ben, infrastructure update and migration, and then a consultation update. Then at about 10:30, we're going to move on to PlanX updates, and that will include testing the prior approval application service with George, looking at planning constraints, and finally a sections navigation. At around 45 minutes past 10, we're going to move on to the question and answer section, and then we'll finish up at about 5 to 11. If you do have any questions, you can post these in the chat during the call, and we'll pick those up in that final section. Otherwise, you can just wait until that section, and then we can unmute you and take any questions that you have then.
Thanks, Rhea. So we were really pleased 2 weeks ago now to attend the Government Project Delivery Awards, which are hosted by the Infrastructure Projects Authority. And we are now Digital Change Project of the Year. This is something that is actually a really great award for us in DLUC to have won. This is not something that DLUC, I think, has won before. And as you can tell, we're all very, very proud, and just wanted to share that with you all. Thank you.
Great. I'm just going to share my screen so we can look at the BOBS roadmap. Okay, so for anyone that hasn't seen this roadmap before, this is a live document that we put together. So all the BOBS product owners and the Unboxed development team, every 6 months or so, we meet up and we talk about what we need to work on for the next 6 months, 12 months, and then 24 months, based on what would add the most value to the BOBS service. So we've grouped these into different groups. So we have product stability and performance, driving user activation, driving user engagement, and then the product integrations that we need to actually be able to use BOBS. I'm just going to focus on the tasks that we currently have in progress. So under the stability and performance section, we have these 2 tickets, which are improving how we collect and respond to live service feedback. And that includes thinking about the ways that we collect feedback and how we learn from what works and what doesn't work, so we can make sure that we actually action all that feedback to improve the service. And then we have collecting ongoing metrics to show the impact of BOBS, and that includes metrics such as time recording, but also qualitative data such as the user experience feedback and what people really like or want to change on that. Under driving user action, driving user activation, we've got these 3 tickets that are all in progress, which include improving the review and sign-off workflow for LDCs, and also achieving a minimum viable product for the assessment tool. Those are both almost finished. We're just sort of doing the final touches to those and then pushing those through to user testing. And then we also have the consultations discovery for prior approvals and full household applications, which is in progress. Actually, we finished most of that work already, so that's really exciting work that we're going to be able to continue pushing forward really soon. And then under driving user engagement, we have the content order and improvements to BOBS. We've just finished this. We've written a guide about the BOBS content, and we're just thinking about the best way to get that out to a wider audience. We might be using GitHub, and then also thinking about how we can action that content guide so that going forward, all the recommendations that we make are picked up by the developers and the designers. And then finally, we have the product integration tickets, which include having a plan for data integrations with existing systems, which Ben's going to present on the next slide, and then investigating the differences and what features BOBS needs for all application types, which Rafaela has just picked up this sprint. So we're really excited to start working on that, because that's going to unlock a whole new group of different application types and assessment methods, for example, and consultation. So that would be a really good step forward for Bobs. So that's everything that we're working on now. This is a document that is accessible to everyone, so we can share that with people if they do want to look at that in more detail. So I'm going to pass on to Ben now to talk about the data integrations workshop.
I think you're actually passing to Celia.
Yeah. So yeah, Ben comes a little bit later. Is someone sharing the slides? Do I then share the slides?
Maybe you share the slides.
Oh, no. Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so last Wednesday, we began the kickoff work to work out what integrations BOPS needs to be a fully end-to-end service and be able to be used by everyone. So we had the POs there and a few sort of technical experts from various councils to help us talk about it. The first thing we did was map the current landscape, which you can see on the picture on the left, and just kind of an idea of what BOPS already integrates with, what else is out there, what kind of things we might need to think about integrating with, just so everyone was on the same page, and kind of understand fully what the current planning, back office planning systems do, which is quite a lot. So that was interesting. We then talked about what actually does end-to-end mean for us right now. Does it mean a fully functioning system where you never have to leave BOPS? Does it mean there are some workarounds that aren't too grating? We're kind of discussing that a little bit. And then, and what are some things we might need to avoid massive workarounds for people? And then we've started to prioritize those. So kind of things like maybe we need a planning register. Do we need to integrate with the current back office planning systems that councils are using? How are we going to get planning history and those kind of things? So on the right, you can see we've got a grid, low impact at one end, high impact at the other, and low impact and high effort. So we're going to start looking at those. And we've actually got a meeting later today with the planning officer, the product owners from Southwark, Lambeth and Bucks to talk about further prioritization and get more of an idea of who we need to begin speaking to and how we need to actually begin tackling these kind of things. And then tomorrow we're going to DLUC and to talk about it even further, because we might need some help from DLUC to get started on some of these. But yeah, it's really exciting thinking about that BOPS might actually do all the things that it needs to do, and this is the first step towards that. And I'm going to pass over to Ben.
Thank you, Celia. So I'm going to run through a quick demo of the BOPS dashboard. As you can see, we have an improved tabs layout. I'm also going to show you two screens viewing all applications, your live applications, and then some cool searching and filtering functions too. So just bear with me. Hopefully I'm sharing my screen. Please say something if you can't see it. Okay, right, morning everyone. I'm Ben, I'm a developer from Unboxed, and I've been working on the BOPS products for a year and a half now. So yeah, I'm quite well versed with everything BOPS and technical. So it's probably been a while since we've shown you the BOPS dashboard, but now seems like a good time. The team has been working a lot on improving the ease of navigation and general user friendliness when the case officer or manager needs to identify a relevant application or get a general overview of their workload. So we have the concept of your live applications, which includes any applications that have been specifically assigned to you or that have yet to be assigned to anyone. So anyone has visibility over it. And then we also have a screen for viewing all applications, which, as you guessed correctly, this allows the user to look and search for all applications in the system for that local authority. We've also added some sophisticated search functionality, including the ability to partially search. So to do this in a scalable way, we've had to add some proper database indexing, which keeps the performance and query time nice and quick. We have the option to search directly for an application reference number, and we can also search by description. So let's say you have a reference number on hand. I'll give you a quick example. We can search that and the relevant one comes along. And if you don't know the exact reference number, you can partially search for it too. And then all the kind of criteria matching this application number will be returned. In reality, it's probably going to be hard to remember that. So let's say you're working on an application to do with a roof extension. You can also just search roof, and then all the descriptions that roof will be returned. And say you wanted to narrow the search down even further, then you can filter by status too. So let's say I know there's a roof extension application I'm working on, which is an assessment, and then you can just apply that too. So that narrows down the search. So you can imagine if you have like hundreds of records, this is super useful. Just to note, we used to have all the statuses as separate tabs on the dashboard, but this is making the view a little noisy, and you can imagine the UI kind of looking a bit funny or even terrible when you have that many tabs in the viewport. So cleaning up the dashboard in this way also helps with mobile usage and monitoring an application when you're on the go. So lastly, I just want to show you a new tab we've implemented, which is this updated tab. And so we understood there's a big pain point in keeping track of cases being processed and determining what stage an application is currently at, and ultimately who's responsible for sort of taking the next action. So this is why we introduced this updated tab, which works and queries the latest audit records made by a user other than the assigned officer. So anyone logged in can see what the latest update to an application has been. So I can quickly demonstrate this working. Let's say I grab this application and I want to change some of the details on the application, such as the address. So I can change this to, let's say, 20 Abbey Gardens. I'll save it. And then if I go back to the homepage and look in updated, there you'll be able to see that the change has been made. So this is just a way for an officer to kind of keep track of what's going on. Okay, so finally, why we're doing all this? Well, big surprise, reasons not just for amusement, but we are building based on user feedback and want to help officers manage and organize their workload a lot more efficiently. Just before I hand back, just to mention some other features we're currently working on. We're adding an immunity assessment flow, also adding some automated testing on our staging environment with production cases. We've added feedback fish to collect any user feedback, which you can see here on this widget. And we're constantly updating and improving our API, which so we have the means to provide a lot of rich and open data, which anyone can access. That's it from me. I'll pass back to Freya.
Thanks, Ben. I think we're passing on to the infrastructure updates and migration.
Yep, that's me.
Thanks, Michael.
Anyone sharing the slides?
I can share them. Let me just open them up.
1 second.
I think Sarah's gonna stay with them. Are you gonna show the slide, Sarah? Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. So something that we also improved is our infrastructure. So our tech stack is Ruby on Rails, and Ruby version 2.7 is coming out end of life this month. And because our infrastructure is on AWS, unfortunately, surprise, surprise, co-deploy agent was outdated and it wasn't supporting anything more than Ruby 2.7. Thus, Bob's applicant was on Heroku, which Heroku has stopped the free tier. So we all decided to migrate into AWS Elastic Container, into Amazon ECS, which this gives us more autonomy, because right now we are scaling containerized application, and that means the dependency is inside the container, and it will be way much easier to scale. And if anyone wants to see, there is a diagram over there. So we have one cluster that we have multiple services related to Bobs, and each of these services, they have their own tasks running constantly, and depending the capacity, they can scale up and down. Passing to Yasmin.
Thanks, Evangelos. Hi, everyone. I wanted to share with you where we're at with the consultations discovery. In the last show and tell, we had just completed the step number 4, synthesized research and reframed insights into opportunities. In the last month, we've been focused on the ideation part. So we carried out 2 ideation workshops. One was in person and the other one was remote, and we had 5 councils participate. We then moved on to synthesizing the ideas and prioritizing features, and now we've just started prototyping. Next slide, please. So yeah, just I wanted to share the councils that participated in each of the workshops. So we had one in person that the London councils were able to join. So we had Lambeth and Camden, and our developers also joined the ideation session, which was really nice. And then we had a remote one that was very similar, but we wanted to make sure that councils who are not London-based are also have the opportunity to participate and make sure that we capture some of the ideas that came out from them as well. Next slide, please. Just a recap of the problem areas that we focused on, are the challenges. So these were the main challenges we focused on in our ideation. One was around how missed consultations cause delays in processing applications. The second one was about the difficulties of chasing internal and external consultees for responses. The third one was around extracting useful and factual information from neighbor responses. And the last one was around collecting, receiving and collecting consultations from different channels can be frustrating and not very efficient. So those were the 4 areas that we focused on in our ideations. Next slide, please. So just quickly, I wanted to share our process on how we did that. So we carried out 2 workshops, as I mentioned, and we did some rapid ideation. Basically, the idea was to generate as many ideas as possible without really thinking about constraints or feasibility. And of course, some ideas were, out of scope, but that was the idea. So what we did was, after we had compiled all the ideas, we grouped them into themes. And these were the main themes that came up. So system alerts was something that was really dominant in the ideas. So people wanted to get notified checklists to help with tasks, audit trails to make sure information on who did what is logged. Automation was a big theme as well, whether it's automating, for example, chaser emails or automating tasks like, templates and stuff like that. Integrations was something that that also came up a lot, and our dev team is also looking into that, as Celia mentioned earlier. Process changes came up as well. So, for example, can we start accepting verbal responses from consultees? Streamlining was really about how do we make sure that consultations are received and processed in one place. So thinking about the different channels and how can we make that more streamlined. Communications was a big theme, whether that's how we communicate to the neighbors. Can we help neighbors respond in a more structured way? Communications with consultees. How can we create more visibility around communication in general? And then there was things there that came up, some ideas that required further research, such as how can we simplify guidance that comes from consultees. This is an area that we'd like to explore a bit more, but it wasn't really in scope for this. But in the future, we'd like to speak to external consultees and understand that area a bit more. Next slide, please. From there, so after we've grouped and themed the ideas, we used story mapping to prioritize features. And basically, along with the POs, we managed to create a walking skeleton, which is basically the bare minimum of what the product should do, which will morph into an MVP, a minimum viable product, and then ideas that we need to think about in the future that are important but not absolutely necessary. So I just extracted a few examples to just give you an idea of what were some of the user stories that were prioritized. So for the bare minimum, a walking skeleton, as a validation officer, I need to know who I should consult based on the application type and constraints relevant to the area. So this is absolutely necessary. An MVP should include, as a case officer, I need to be notified as soon as consultation requests have been sent out. And then something that we will think of in the future is, as a validation officer, I need to scan neighbor letters and upload them in Bobs as text. So you get a sense of how these user stories were prioritized. So we are now currently starting to prototype, starting with the walking skeleton and then moving into the MVP, and hopefully starting to test and iterate as we go along. That's it for me, Freya. Back to you.
Thank you. I think we're going on to the planning updates now.
Thanks, Freya. Hi, I'm George. I'm the planning content lead for Open Systems Lab. We're the supplier of the PlanX product and currently leading on service development. The content team have recently finished version 1 of our prior approval service. We offer a comparable service to the planning portal, including 30 different prior approval projects. Each one has separate restrictions and requirements. Slide, please. Slide, please. Thanks. The first part of the service determines whether the user's project is within scope of prior approval. Does it comply with the legislation? And because a large proportion of applications are refused on this basis,
This is a high value part of the service for both users and the local planning authority. Slide, please. When a project is out of scope, they'll get a result like this explaining that their application will be refused. We're opening up testing to service owners this week, and we're really interested in their feedback on this content. Slide, please. I've tested 50 real prior approval cases across Lambeth, Bucks and Southwark using the new service. The proportion of projects I tested broadly reflects the spread of applications received across these 3 local planning authorities, and larger rear extensions accounts for about 70% of all prior approval applications. Slide, please. I was really interested in how the digital service would perform when dealing with these cases. 50% of the cases were refused, and 40% of those refusals were due to the project being out of scope of prior approval. The digital service returned a planning permission needed result for these cases. And as a user, I was put off by continuing with the application due to the clarity and directness of this content. I might adjust my answers to explore how to sit the project within the scope of prior approval. Slide, please. Let's focus on the results specifically for larger extensions. Cases that were otherwise refused for being out of scope become prevented cases. Like the previous charts, the digital service also reduces the number of withdrawn cases. Often local planning authorities encourage withdrawals instead of refusals. These cases were also out of scope and in this case are translated into prevented cases. So from my testing, it's looking like the service might be valuable in reducing out of scope prior approval projects. This could account for about 30 or 40% of cases that are currently unnecessarily processed by the local planning authority. Thanks for listening to me talking about testing. I'll pass on to Jess to talk about planning constraints.
Actually, it's going to be me first. So hi everyone, I'm Alistair from OSL. As you, those of you familiar with this work will already know, one of the kind of big overarching aims of this phase that we're coming to an end, towards the end of, is really just improving both users and officers' experience of the digital planning services as far as we can, in a whole range of ways, in small ways and in big ways. I'm going to talk about one of the smaller ways potentially, and then Jess is going to talk about a really huge feature that we think is going to make a big difference. And yeah, so there's a whole range of kind of features and stuff that we've been working on, and these are 2 of them that we hope are just going to improve people's lives, basically, in terms of just making the users' experience and officers' experience just a bit nicer, really. So yeah, one of those is around the improving planning constraints, and I should caveat this, by the way, because I'm kind of presenting this, but I'm really presenting this work has really been done primarily by our designer Ian and by Lucy and Lam, our user researchers. So I'm sort of stealing all their glory, really, and presenting their work here. Next slide, please. So one of the things that all the services running on PlanX can do at the moment is this thing where once you enter your property, your address and potentially draw your site outline if appropriate, it's then automatically going and looking up all the planning constraints that apply to that site, such as, are you in a conservation area, is the building listed, etc., etc. We've had this for a while, and it is, you know, it is like it's a huge moment. It's a hugely beneficial moment for users, kind of transformative in terms of your experience of the planning system compared to previously. Partly because, you know, there's this kind of this green box here is talking about, yeah, it's a massive benefit to not go and have to look this stuff up for yourself, but also because a huge number of, you know, users of the planning system don't know the planning system, and the planning process is famously mysterious and obscure and arcane, and a big part of that is because you don't know what you don't know. And so this is kind of, it feels like a bit of a trap for non-experts that you sort of could put in for an application, and yet you might need planning permission due to a thing called an Article 4 direction, for example, which you've probably never heard of, if you know, unless you've already tangled with the planning system before. So this is kind of a superpower, right, to be able to go and fetch all of this data. And it's behind the scenes, it's made possible by all the work of the GIS offices in councils who are building these layers, publishing this data, and of course by the planning.data team at Deluc, who have built this service, which is aggregating and tidying up and standardizing all this data to make it available. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of work goes on behind the scenes to make this apparently quite simple moment possible, where it says, cool, okay, this is your property, here's all the planning policies that apply to you. Seems like such a basic, obvious thing that we would expect a 21st century planning system to be able to do. And we can, and we have been, but as you can see here, the actual component in the Plan X is not exactly simple. It's this sort of big list of grey boxes, and it's like, what does this even mean? So kind of users on one hand have fed back that, you know, this is cool, this is a great thing, but actually we've had lots of feedback from user testing over the time saying, well, look, this is a huge amount of information. I don't really know what to do about this. Do I need to act on these? Is this a whole, is this a thing I need to do? No, it's not just, it's actually just information. And sort of beginning to nudge us in the right direction. So quite a lot of users have said, look, actually, I only really want to know about the constraints that do apply. I don't want a whole essay of the constraints that don't apply. But if a constraint does apply, I want to know more about it. And there might be more of this, right? So you know, one of this future user needs potentially, which could be really interesting around this component, which we're not currently looking at, which would be, for example, showing a map, and the map would include the property and the relevant, say, conservation area, because that would help pick up some of the edge cases where literal edge cases where a property is right on the edge of a conservation area or something like that. So you might have false positives or false negatives in the way that this data is picked up. We're not looking at that just yet, but it has been really clear to us for a while that there's a lot we could do with this component to just make it much nicer for users. And so we've finally got the chance to turn our design attention to doing that. Next slide, please. And another sort of dimension to that is also reflecting how we communicate the limitations of it at the moment. So although we're fetching a load of that data, there's a lot of data that we're still not getting. One of the most crucial bits of data for the services like find out if you need planning permission and apply for a lawful development certificate is we don't currently have data on whether a property might have a historic planning condition that was placed upon it that specifically removes certain permitted development rights for that property, which is a thing that can happen and does happen. But we had this sort of generic warning sort of slap in the middle of a service, but actually users were like, this is actually quite scary. I don't really know what to do with this. It's a bit confusing, and it makes the service feel even longer. So we don't want to do that. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully, and we will. I will just show the new designs that we're currently working on. These are still very much works in progress, and we've been testing these designs with users, and they're going to be continuing to do so. So the current design looks something like this. the language around this is really, really interesting. So I won't go on about that, but it's actually a really interesting thing about getting the language right. You can see that we're exploring ideas around first only showing ones that do apply, not showing ones that don't apply. I haven't got a mock-up here of what it will show you when nothing applies, but obviously that would be a key thing. Trying to make it visually differentiate it a bit. So we're exploring, not entirely sure around these at the moment, but exploring this idea of dividing into themes and then softly using theme colors, which could potentially be picked up later as well to articulate some of these planning themes, such as heritage and conservation, trees, ecology, and so forth. We're sort of tentatively exploring this use of color and sort of picking up in other areas of government where these things are reflected. Colors are used to reflect these sorts of things. So, for example, brown for heritage and conservation, because brown is used on road signs for the same reason. But that's a kind of interesting aspect to this. And you can see that then people will, you'll have the option to kind of drill in if something does apply and see a bit more information about, specific information about what that is. Okay, what is a conservation area? What on earth is this thing that you're explaining? And where did this data come from? Who's responsible for that, especially if I think it's wrong? Again, what we haven't got in these designs at the moment, but could be a future feature, is allowing users not just to report in inaccuracy, but potentially to override it and mark the fact that they've done so if they think it's wrong. But if users want to, they can not just expand these, but also then expand to see the full list of other things that have been checked. And also this idea of actually putting it in a probably the right sort of hierarchy, putting in warnings in here to say, oh, by the way, there are other things that this service hasn't checked, just to make you aware of, but in a slightly less scary, in-your-face way than we were looking at before. I think that's everything really. We're going to continue exploring this and testing it. If anyone has any ideas about this, please feel free to ping them at us or ask questions, whatever, at the end. And with that, I will hand back over to Jess.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. I'm going to share my screen and share a bit about our work on sections and navigation for PlanX. All right, so this is the PlanX editor where planning officers and sort of service owners are designing the applicant-facing forms. And these are sort of structured as big flowcharts or big graphs. And there's sort of been a long trick here where this is sort of a building the graph can be very sort of long and unwieldy. And there's been sort of this long trick of service designers using these sort of little sticky note type hacks to sort of organize their content in a flow into groups so it's easier to manage. You can see here, these are sort of like, they're hidden from the overall service, but service designers use them. And I think they point to this really important thing that in the same way that a service designer wants to be able to sort of group the content they're writing into like thematic sections, applicants also want thematic sections when they're going through applications. And this led us to sort of one of the big features of PlanX that aims to sort of address this question of how do we help the service both just feel shorter, but also how do we help explain to applicants everything that a service entails upfront rather than question by question as you're going through and you're never quite sure when it's going to end. And then you maybe get to these big things like upload your files that you didn't see coming. So yeah, first I'm going to talk about how editors are going to be building this into services, and then we can go through a very quick test LDC of what it will be like as an applicant applying for a service that is using sections now. So right now, editors are using these little sticky notes that are hidden from the service. This is a little preview here on the sidebar. What they will have the option to do is add a new type of component called a section. They can give this section a title, and and we can remove our old little sticky notes. What's really exciting about these sections is they're now going to have sort of a meaningful representation in the flow that the applicant sees. It'll pick up all of the other sections in your flow, which I've already sort of started adding throughout here for the sake of this demo. And as editors are adding sections, we build in some simple rules for them of how sections can be used so that we make sure that applicants have predictable experiences. For instance, I can't put a section onto the branch of a graph because I want to be able to ensure that every applicant, independent of their answer to a specific question, sees every section of a flow. So there's just little sort of like guidance, tips and error messages basically for service designers as they're going through about how they can add sections. So here we go. I'm going to publish my changes. And this will add sections to my flow. And we'll just let this publish real fast. This is sort of how we version control our service content. And then as soon as I get a little success message here, oh no. Let's try one more time. Apologies that things get a little laggy when I'm sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, that one didn't time out. So now we are at the applicant facing apply for a lawful development certificate. I am going to just quickly answer like the first bit of questions in this flow so we can start to see sections in action, but we won't submit a full LDC today. So you can see now, normally when I start a lawful development certificate, the first question I would see as an applicant is being prompted to enter my postcode. Now instead, I am seeing an overview of all of the sections contained in this service. So I sort of know what to expect, questions about the property, questions about me as the applicant. I know I'll have to upload documents and drawings. I know that I'll like review and pay for my application at the end. I cannot actually travel forward in time, but I can move through sections consecutively. And now when you are sort of on individual questions, we'll have this nice sort of navigation header that reminds you which section you're in, how many more to go. I'm just going to sort of move through these quickly right now so that we can get through a couple sections. And here you go. You can see that every time I hit a new section, my previous one will have an updated status. My next one will become ready to continue, and I can continue sort of moving forward here. And yeah, I think this is, they hopefully sort of just predictably work that way all the way through the service. When you save and return, you'll be able to come back and see the status of all of your sections. If any content has changed in a previous section, since you were last doing your application, you'll see that it needs updated. As you can still go back through the service and change previous answers the same way that you used to be able to, and then come back forward. And that is, I think, sort of the highlights of sections in navigation.
Amazing.
I think I'm passing back to Sarah, unless there's any questions.
There you go.
Okay, I can pick up any questions. So we have had a few questions in the chat during the presentation. I won't read these out. If anyone has any more questions, please pop those in now. We did have a few questions about the validity process, for example. We're just providing a response to you, Miles, in the chat at the moment. And a few questions about the searching infrastructure and about the maps. So if anyone wants to read those, I won't read them all out because they're quite long, but they are in the chat. So if there's no more questions, then we'll go on to the final slide, please, Sarah. So as always, thanks everyone for attending. We really appreciate the time that you take to hear our updates. It really helps us to think about what we've achieved in the last 2 sprints and present that to you. And we can also celebrate what we've achieved as well, which is great. This is our contact details. We have the project website link here. There's a lot of information about the services on that website, and also the contact email addresses for Lambeth, Buckinghamshire and Suffolk Planning Departments there as well. The next show and tell is going to be on Wednesday, the 26th of April at 10 AM at the same link. So we look forward to seeing most of you there. Thanks again.